Welcome to another broadcast from mindyourhealthcast.com. I want to remind you that this is a weekly program. The original program each week is posted on Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and it remains there throughout the next week, 24 hours a day up and through Thursday night. So if for chance you happen to miss it on Sunday when it's first posted, then you can catch it sometime during the week. If you want copies of one you missed or for further investigation, you can go to our website, and they are available for purchase on DVDs through the website from our shopping cart. Some of these are probably going to be worth keeping. We've tried, and in fact I feel we're accomplishing, bringing you unusual subjects and material that you may not have thought about, and some that you maybe have thought about but didn't think anybody else thought about it. At any rate, it's all going to be there. Remember that when you go to mindyourhealthcast.com, there is lots of information. There's free downloads of ebooks that have been posted you can get. We keep adding to the list. We add to the list of books that cover the material we're talking about. There's equipment, all kinds of material available and helpful things. And as time goes by, we'll be covering each of those in more detail that are very beneficial for your health in today's world. If you want to go to the broadcast for Mind Your Healthcast, you can click directly from there, and also our new website on alternative health and prevention is linked to Mind Your Healthcast. You can go there and click directly to that program and that site, and on there you're going to find some newsletters archived on health, and you'll also find a questionnaire that you can take, and if you take that questionnaire, it will then rate it for you, and you can get a printout, and we're going to be starting to utilize that as part of our workup for people, and for people who want to do a very basic program. So, after all of that, that brings me to the subject that we're going to talk about today. And what I'm talking about is something I considered for a book. I seem to not ever get the time to write a book. I've written part of one before, but it seems that so many other activities have come along that I felt more pressing at the time, so we have not done that up to this point. I've probably written a book several times already from broadcasts and the research for broadcasts, but we'll get one together someday soon. And the one that had hit me was thinking of a book called Dependent Nation, At What Cost? Now, you're probably wondering what I'm referring to, and I'm referring to the fact that it seems that we have developed a nation, if not a world, that more and more is becoming dependent on the taking of some kind of chemical or drug to function on an everyday basis. For some reason, we have gotten into the idea that we should be sick, that it's important to be sick all the time, and we are reinforced by a lot of methods. So what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit about this whole concept, and a little bit about the fact that we are being programmed into being sick, and maybe we should have even called it program sickness. At any rate, it struck me a while back as I was looking through my library. I ran across a book I had picked up along the way called The Cost of Being Sick, a preventative initiative. And so this individual that has written this actually is a producer of medical equipment, not the medication side, but various devices and equipment to help people in getting well, or help the doctors in doing whatever they're doing for someone to make the job easier or more efficient. For example, one of the products he developed, and most people probably don't give this a thought, one of the products he developed was to keep from having your baby mixed at the hospital. he found out as he had gotten married and was having the first child, he became aware of the fact that several thousand babies a year get switched into hospitals. And that concerned him considerably. And so as a consequence, he developed a device that at the time of birth, it produces a coded band for both mother and infant that stays on them, is not removed from the time they're born, and can track them so that the baby doesn't get misplaced or displaced and end up somewhere else. So that was a big concern of his. But then as he's worked with medicine along the way, he has become aware of the outlandish cost of medicine. And what has happened is that we have, in my mind, become so programmed that we cannot live without drugs, that we actually focus on every little symptom that comes along with the fear that we're getting some terrible illness, and add to that the TV commercials that says, well, if you have this, you should see your doctor, that may be a symptom of blah, blah, blah. And so what has happened is the pharmaceutical interests have developed a, what I call a deceptive web to trap people in, and once they get in, they feel that they are stuck for the rest of their life. They teach the doctors from the medical schools in the courses on pharmacology that the people must take this drug or they're going to die. And so they're with conviction telling the patient the same thing. If you don't take this drug, you're going to die. Chances are, as with everyone, we're going to die regardless. But it's an exaggeration in most cases, and I'm not saying there's not cases where that could be an exception, and there could be, but generally speaking, it's not the case that you're not going to die. And the reason I know that is I've had people on their own decide at some point that the adverse effects of the drug were so bad they weren't going to take it anymore, and they quit, and they didn't die. It's just interesting that people are motivated and moved by fear. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about all this. Now, what this gentleman is talking about in the book, his name is Nicholas J. Webb, is The Cost of Being Sick. And that book is going to be, in fact, all the books I'm going to be mentioning today are going to be on our forum page for this particular session. And also, you can click right from our shopping cart and go to Amazon and get them. And usually I check them all out. As far as I know, I checked out most of the ones I have today, and they are all still available. Amazon is usually pretty good in having them available even from many years back, or being in contact with some type of source that if it's no longer in print, that they can find copies of it. They're probably one of the best, and sometimes if you find that Amazon doesn't show it, Barnes & Noble will likely have it too. So over the years, I've pretty much been able to find one between one or the others. Okay, so I think everyone agrees at this point that our health bill for this country is outlandish. They call it health care, but when you really look at it, it isn't health care, it's sick care. If it were health care, it would be producing health. But it isn't producing health, and I also think probably most people would agree that that's a major problem. What I see in the whole thing, having observed the changes over the years, and I've been around in this world for several years, I noticed going on changes in the way things were produced. I looked at the way the pharmaceuticals have been prescribed. And I'm thinking back along the way they marketed them was mostly through the doctors and occasionally in advertising in magazines and occasionally on the radio and so forth, but it was never a major campaign. Well, as time has gone on and the marketing has increased, it appears that they've come up with more and more ways to do it, and the ways that they have done it are to convince you that you have to have those. It is interesting to watch how all of this has come into play, but what I can see and what I know from the field of psychology because I have an extensive background in psychotherapy and psychology. And what I've noticed from that is that some of the things that are being done are to persuade you, and not necessarily that you're aware that you're being persuaded, or that you're being programmed to be sick. But the fact is that you can, and that can happen. And as I've looked at this whole program today, it looks to me like it's probably going to be more than one session, because as I started to develop it, it looked like if I'm going to really tell the story that I needed to really get into the core of it. You needed to understand something about how the brain works, how the emotions work, about placebo and nocebo and all kinds of things, that it would really be important to understand what I'm getting at. So in order to do that, I decided that I probably needed to expand it a little. So we're probably going to have 2 sessions to really get this in a decent way. So the question is, are you being programmed to be sick? And if you think about it, just watch some of the advertisements. For example, they start talking, in fact, did a long time ago, started talking about the common cold, the common flu, the common headache, common backache, common heartburn, all these things, and got people thinking about all of these different symptoms. And then as time goes on, we start thinking about this and we kind of expect it. And to me, what they're doing when they do these commercials is to create a feeling or a state of expectation that you're going to have it. And if you expect to get it, the chances are that you're going to get it. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about placebo and nocebo. Nocebo is the opposite of placebo. I can define it for you. Placebo, which most people have heard about and don't realize how powerful it is. Placebo is actually to improve. It means to make you feel better in the commonest terms. And nocebo is just the opposite, is to make you feel worse or to make you sick. In homeopathic medicine, you have the word nosode, which refers to a preparation made from unhealthy tissues, secretions, and viruses, and so forth. And you have an illness called nosocomial illness. Nosocomial is from a hospital, meaning you go into a hospital and you get sick from being in the hospital. So there is a term for it, nosocomial. You don't hear it referred to often. The same as iatrogenic, meaning caused by the treatment, which is referred to by the treatment the doctors have given, can make you sick and create problems, which they do because of the drugs having such adverse effects. And so, right off, we start the flu season by being told, you better get your flu shot because you're going to get the flu. The flu is around. And so you buy that and you go get the flu shot. Now, if you believe it strongly enough that the flu shot is going to keep you well, then probably you won't get the flu. But I suspect it has nothing to do with the flu shot. On the other hand, if you're kind of neutral about it and you accepted the fact that you were programmed to get the flu, you're going to get the flu even in spite of the flu shot. And I know of both of those types of things happening with people, either going ahead and getting the flu anyhow or not getting it because they got the flu shot and thinking that they were protected. It is interesting about the flu shot because every year a group of people in pharmaceuticals get together and decide what is kind of likely to be the strains of flu that might come around this year. And out of that, they whip up in their cauldron a batch of a vaccine, which supposedly is to protect you from the hypothetical flus that might be coming up. The problem is that it is interesting to me that it never happens that the flus that they have predicted are the ones that actually show up. So, in fact, if the vaccination really did the job that it was supposed to, and that was the flu strain that is out there that you get exposed to, then it probably might be beneficial. But the fact is, it never is the strain of flu. And they always say, because all of a sudden all these people are getting the flu that have taken the flu shot, they say, well, it wasn't the strain that we suspected or predicted that it might be, so therefore that's why it didn't work. There's more implications in that, and we're not going to go into that today, but we are going to be doing a program on immunizations and vaccines and all of that at some point. It's going to probably be at least a 2-session program also, but we'll go into more detail on that. I've studied this subject extensively for years, but I want to be totally up to date, and I also want to break it down in a way that it can be presented, that it makes some sense to you. So anyhow, we're programmed. I feel that they start on the television, and a little bit later we're going to talk about why television is so powerful in causing people to take drugs or want to take drugs. I will say that the pharmaceutical companies are extremely good at marketing. They probably hire the best advertising agencies and the most creative ones to come up with creative ways. And if you watch their ads, and we'll talk about that in a little bit in short time here, but if you watch their ads, you can see all of the gimmicks and the reasoning that went into putting this thing out the way it is, that grabs your attention and actually puts a program in you to go and get the drug. So it's basically a form of programming or mind programming, and we'll be talking a little bit about that. And an individual that I've been aware of for many years, I met many years ago, has written a book on the last couple of years or so on mind programming. His name is Eldon Taylor. Will be on the book list. And he wrote this book telling you really what you can do. In fact, what to me is interesting is that he talks about the fact that it is, he's giving you this information so you understand how it works, bottom line. And secondly then, how the same principles can be used in a positive way to do something for yourself, to develop yourself, or to improve yourself. And to me, it's like everything that's out there that we run into seems to be a two-edged sword. It has the potential to be used in a positive way, and it has the potential to be used in a negative way. And the exploiters are going to utilize the negative side, and of course the people who are out working to help people improve themselves in their lives are going to be utilizing it in a positive way. So that's what Eldon Taylor's book is about, is, okay, you need to understand how all this works, and once you understand that, then you can, on a conscious, deliberate basis, utilize some of these principles to improve yourself. And I think that's very good. He's put out a lot of books, and you'll probably want to go to his website at some point and look at some of the things that he's doing. Okay, so we build this expectation, and I'm going to tell you why that works in just a little bit. Because of why? Well, it gets down to 3 words: profit, profit, profit. It seems that the whole game is that the pharmaceutical industry has grown into a monster. They have to keep it going. They have to keep showing a profit all the time. I have a personal acquaintance that was a high-level supervisor with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies, and he told me that every week he was reminded by the higher-ups that the investors in the pharmaceutical expected an increase every month, and it was his job to produce that. If he could not do that or would not do that, then they would find someone who would. So the fact is that he at some point got tired of it and he left, and in fact now he's in a manufacturing field for himself where he makes natural products. So it was kind of interesting to me. I've had actually pharmaceutical representatives who have been to me as patients, and I remember one in particular. I said, "What do you do? What's your profession?" He says, "I'm ashamed to tell you I sell pharmaceuticals for a major pharmaceutical company, but I won't take those things." A lot of the people know what's going on, but they're not too inclined to talk about it, or if it's their job at the moment, they don't want to disturb their job. So they are not going to be saying too much until after the fact that they've left. Now, we mentioned in cholesterol that one of the researchers left a major manufacturer of one of the statins, and has now been telling people and writing books that, number one, the company knew that cholesterol is not the cause of cardiovascular problems and heart attacks. They knew, number two, that the statins are very dangerous and that in many cases they're fatal. But all of this has kind of been kept hush, and as we get more and more, we're going to do one whole session along the way just on pharmaceuticals and the whole drug industry and so forth, which you'll probably find interesting. We can touch on pieces of it, and I guess it doesn't bother that we, be a big problem, that we can repeat pieces of things, because along the way we want to bring you into a position so you see the whole big picture, because there's a big picture. And the big picture is what you need to see, how all these pieces come together. I am giving you little building bricks along the way, and I keep repeating certain ones because they need to stick, because even though you hear it, you may not really hear it. It may just kind of bounce off, or you might go right on through, or it may not seem significant at this point. But as you learn other things, and then you begin to put the whole picture together, then it starts to make sense, and then you begin to realize. Now, of course, the other interesting thing is that once they have you expecting you're going to be sick, then they have to offer you speedy relief. And so many years ago, our friend Speedy Alka-Seltzer started showing up on early TV, and everybody could associate. He looked so friendly and so nice and could make you feel good so fast that it became really a very good sales tool for Alka-Seltzer. And there's other ones that came along that they've got those interesting little rhymes or ditties of certain types that they use to get it to stick in your head, like a little jingle that just bounced around. Years ago, I remember one called Snapback with Standback for people with back aches and headaches. I remember the one about Carter's Little Pills, and they put it into a jingle, and those were also good, and Doan's Pills, and so forth. And so basically we're talking about radio days to begin with, but they put them in the form of jingles, and those jingles have a way of sticking in your mind. And that's part of the programming process, is if you hear this jingle over and over, pretty soon it's programmed in and it's motivating you. We don't have time to talk about memes at this point, but those actually are what are called mind viruses. That they are not only instilled in you, and it affects you, but you pass it on to other people. And so the advertising thing, they started radio, and then as time went on, the TV came along, and it got better and better because the capabilities of television are much more powerful. And I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. But all of this came about for what? Disease, so-called dis-ease. And really, that's what the word means, dis-ease, meaning not at ease. And that's what really we're talking about is that we don't feel up to where we ought to be. Now, there's many reasons for that, and there's many ways of dealing with it, but the pharmaceuticals would like you to believe that it's only the drugs that do the job, and so that you should immediately go out and get those drugs. But, it's interesting if you step backward a little bit, that, and we've said it before, but I'm not sure it's clicking yet. The medications that are sold today are not sold for the purpose of curing anything. If you read the books and the any of them, the PDR, any of the books, Materia Medicas, about medications, you will find that predominantly it's going to say for the relief of the symptoms of. So basically, it's not designed to cure anything. It's not the purpose of it. Now, why would that be? Well, of course, the nice thing is that this time we made you feel a little better by giving you this drug, but we haven't corrected anything, so we know you're going to be sick a little later because whatever was wrong that caused the symptoms this time are still there. Now, I keep emphasizing, because it really needs to click with people, that symptoms are not the disease. It's hard, and we talked about it with homotoxicology, and we've kept throwing it in a bit here and there. but it needs to really connect. Symptoms are not the disease. Symptoms are your body's immune system attempting to correct a problem. So it's true that they don't feel good. You know, the symptoms of inflammation we've talked about time again: redness, heat, swelling, and pain. That's the 4 symptoms of inflammation. They do not feel good. And on top of that, if it's significant, throw in fever. So then that complex people don't like. It interferes with their life. They don't enjoy things. Sometimes they have to lay down and relax and rest because they feel bad. And so they don't like it. So what do? You get medications that stop the redness and heat and swelling and pain. And how do they do that? By shutting down the immune system. It's true you feel better temporarily. But what if you have not taken care of the problem? Well, if you haven't, the problem is still there and it's going to get worse. So you have to be willing to understand that if you want to have speedy relief from symptoms, you've got either you can take a drug, but all you're doing is shutting down the immune system and the problem is still there and will reappear down the road. I can assure you it's going to reappear down the road as a more serious problem because you haven't taken care of the problem. So we think because we feel better today, we are better, and unfortunately we're not. Now, I'm saying all that to say that I've observed over the years that when a new, quote, disease or dis-ease is found or discovered or made, you know, how do you define a disease? By a complex of symptoms. So basically what has happened over the years, and I'm sure you're seeing every year more new ones come up, things like this new sleep programs they have, the sleep apnea and all of that, they're making a big deal out of it. They've got a whole new set of diagnoses, a whole new set of tests, and a whole new set of treatments, which brings in a whole new set of money. And it's easy, if you've got a diagnosis, then you can get insurance coverage once there's an established diagnosis, and then you can collect money on it. Of course, there's no interest in getting it well because the profit is in bringing in money. And so what happens is that I have found that diseases become an institution. I've watched it happen over the years in many, many illnesses. They start out, so what happens? Well, if there's enough people are getting it or seem to be getting it, and it's hard to say sometimes how many people really are getting it because people with the memes will pick up the program and think they have it and can even have the same symptoms. And there's a whole study in itself. And we will talk a little bit more about that. But at any rate, enough people get it, then they decide, well, we need to do some research on it. So they go out and ask for money from people so we can do research. And then pretty soon, with the research, of course, we haven't solved it. We just now can diagnose it or define it. And then as time goes on, with this research money coming in, more people get into research, so they need more money coming in. And of course then whatever palliating drugs that they can develop to relieve the symptoms, if at all possible, get involved. Or if the people have something they need to take oxygen, or if they have something they keep monitoring their blood, or if they have things or special supplies they have to get, and if they have counseling that they have to have available for the people who have it because we haven't found the cure for it, therefore it is incurable at the moment, and so at best we may be able to give you a little relief. Now I find it interesting. I don't know if it rings a bell because I go out every year and I see all these campaigns. We're going for breast cancer, we're doing for diabetes, we're doing for this problem, Alzheimer's, and you name it. In all of this, when it's all done, where are the cures and where is the solving of the problem? And so I finally realized that every disease becomes an institution. once it becomes an institution, a lot of people's income depends on that disease. Now, I pose the question, is there any great motivation to get rid of the disease, period? Or is the big motivation to keep researching, promising a cure, palliating symptoms, and taking in huge amounts of money to do all that? Have you seen one major illness that has gotten tremendous press over the years, that has taken in thousands of people, and terms of work, given them jobs, and generated millions and sometimes billions of dollars of money, and not produced a cure? Have you seen that? Has one of them produced a cure? Arthritis still has no cure. Diabetes still has no cure. Cancer still has no cure. Alzheimer's still has no cure. I guess go on for dozens and dozens of these chronic problems that there's no cure, but they're researching, and every year, just before time for the money drive again, they get on TV and they dangle a little possibility. Well, this is showing promise, but we need more money. We've got to do more research. And I've watched it with cancer, and I've just, as I say, I've watched it with all these different illnesses. And every year, after the campaign, after the money comes in, they've got enough to go for the next year. And what comes out of it? Well, you know, the possibility. I remember interferon coming along for cancer. And, oh, this shows great promise. It's at the beginning, it showed great promise. Cancer, neurological problems like MS and Parkinsonism, and just all kinds of things it showed promise for. Well, each year, before the campaign, they talked about interferon. Then you never heard about it again until the next year. But then, once they found that it was not going to do all of that, and probably people were getting tired of hearing about it, they had to come up with something new. And so, one, I remember hearing about liver cancer. They came up and they said, oh, there's a new breakthrough that shows great promise. And I'm anxious to say, well, what is it that they've come up with this time? I was ready to see that. And so then when I found out, what they were saying is that several people who have taken this have extended their life 30 days. And I'm thinking, first of all, how can you predict a death within 30 days? In most cases, unless the person's ready to go and you know in a day or two they're going to be gone, how are you going to predict in 30 days? So how could they even estimate that, well, it on the average could increase people with liver cancer's life by 30 days? So, but it's that same promise. Then we have the genetic promise. Oh, we're going to do the genome project. We're going to be able to change the genes. We're going to be able to improve the genes. But we need more money. We need more money. So if you watch, I mean, I don't know how many good thinking citizens and benevolent citizens sponsor some of these drives to go out and do a race for cancer or a march for cancer or whatever, and they get all enthused, they generate all this people, they go out and generate all this money, but nothing happens. Next year it's the same thing again. I mean, to me, it's almost like we ignore the fact that nothing ever happens, but we are kind of hoping somewhere along the way something might. And so we keep financing all this. So I just found that once it becomes an institution, we got a big problem. And you'll notice that every year they're now coughing up 1, 2, or 3 new diseases, which are names of a group of symptoms. You realize that you can take a person and they've got a lot of symptoms, and you can pick a certain group of those symptoms out, group them together, and give it a name, and that's a disease. And it's diagnosable, so then if you're going to get somebody to fall into that category, you've got to find those things within the person. You can ignore the other symptoms, but we need to find this set of symptoms so we can diagnose this disease, so we can get insurance coverage for it, and so forth. Now, I'm saying all that to say, look what is happening at our health bill. Why do we have to spend $1 trillion a year? My question is, are we healthier with all of that? Who would argue that we have a higher state of health than we did because we have put all this money into it? And yet we have people, out of fear, clamoring, we want more coverage, we want all this, we want all that. And of course, you can't keep drawing from a system if you have every person in the country drawing out $100,000 a year. Where's it going to come from? Somebody has to put it in. That means if you draw out 100,000, I have to put in 100,000. But then if I want to draw out 100,000 too, where's it going to come from? I mean, it's just not going to come from thin air, and I don't think people are thinking. They just think somehow we got to have more money to buy more drugs and more procedures, and some of the treatments anymore are outlandishly priced. It just ends up that in our country there's no price control on the pharmaceuticals. They can charge anything they want, and there's no examination. There's no proving why they need to do it. You can go across the border and buy the same drugs in Canada for less money. You can go to Mexico, buy it, and then they tried to scare people by saying, well, but they may not be as good, but yet they're in the same package with the same name, made by the same company, and they're sealed packages. Why is it that they don't want you to do it? Because they're making a killing in this country on the price they're able to charge because there's no controls. Okay, so let's talk about disease for a minute. You know, we've been under this illusion that we are attacked by things, and once we're attacked by it, then we have a disease, and therefore the treatment is we need this magic bullet to shoot it out. Now, it's interesting about the magic bullets because as you go back historically, you find that a high percentage of these magic bullets actually ended up being worse than the problem. Now, we mentioned before a bit about, and we're going to be mentioning a lot about it shortly because we're going to be talking about AIDS and we're going to be talking about syphilis. And one of the early treatments for syphilis was mercury. Now, mercury, of course, it's interesting because it shuts down your immune system because it destroys the bone marrow. It goes to the bones of the head and face and ultimately the whole body and destroys the bones. And it goes to the brain nervous system and destroys the brain nervous system. Now, interestingly, tertiary syphilis does exactly the same thing. Those of you who can recall a little bit about homeopathy we talked about will realize that there is a minimum relationship between syphilis and mercury. And so it's true, if you give some mercury to somebody, could improve the symptoms of syphilis, but you can, of course, be killed by the mercury poisoning. And so that was one of the first treatments. In fact, those doctors were called quacksalver doctors who used mercury, which means from the Latin quicksilver, which is mercury, in the treatment. And some people feel that's where the word quack came from because some of the doctors refused to quit using mercury to treat syphilis even though it had been found that the mercury was extremely toxic to the person, and so those doctors were referred to as quacksalver doctors or eventually just quack doctors, which meant the quicksilver treatment. But they replaced it later with another finding. It was called Ehrlich's magic bullet. Salvarsan, which was interestingly, instead of being made of mercury, it was made of arsenic. Arsenic has certain resemblances to syphilis, but when we get into the AIDS-syphilis relationship and all of that, you're going to find that none of those really get rid of the problem. They only have been driving it deeper inward, and so we're going to be talking quite a bit about that. I hope you'll be tuned in because it's going to be very eye-opening. And as I say, the whole disease thing is to take a group of symptoms, put it together, and once we put these symptoms together, to call it a name. And once we call it a name, then we can put it into the classification, the ICD, International Classification of Diseases, give it a name, and therefore you can get reimbursed for it. You can get paid. So my question sometimes is, what's the motivation of that? Is it the welfare of the patient, or is it the fact we can classify a new disease and we've got a new way to collect revenue? And some of the things they group together and call it illness, in my mind, have nothing to do with being an illness, but if you can collect those symptoms just right and package them just right, you can give them a name and you can get something for it. And as I mentioned, I get the suspicion that all of that has to do with profit. Now, it's interesting when we look at the pharmaceutical concept, Now, you're wondering probably where I'm going with all this is that I'm again laying some foundation about what the condition is. Then we want to look at what some of the real problems are. You know, why do we get sick? And why does it cost so much? Well, it costs so much because so many people are sick or made to think they're sick. That's one of the reasons it costs so much. And then there's no control on how much they can charge for anything. When you get a particular disease such as cancer, recently I found out, and I think I mentioned it. If I haven't, I'll mention it again anyhow, regardless. I found out that the average cancer patient, from the time they're diagnosed until they are treated to death, brings in about $1 million. I used to say about 500,000, but the number now is on the average $1 million. Now you, in good logic, tell me, could they afford to get rid of, let's say tomorrow somebody comes up with something that says this will cure cancer, and the treatment only costs a few hundred or at the most a few $1,000s. Are you, if you're making $1 million off of every cancer patient, want somebody coming on the market with something for a few hundred or a few $1,000s that can actually get rid of cancer? There would be some conflictual things going on, I'm sure. Are you willing to trade $1 million per patient for a few thousand per patient? It raises some ethical issues, to say the least. Well, it's interesting about all this treatment thing, and it goes on and on. I just recently, and I think I've found out, I used to say that it's $2,000 to $3,000 a month for the immunosuppressive drugs to keep a kidney in the body from kidney transplant. I just recently found out directly from somebody who had done it that it's $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year, and you have to prove you can pay it on the front end or you can't get the transplant. That I found out. If you got it, you can move ahead of other people on the list who don't have the money to do it, and they're going to sit waiting forever because it's not going to happen. I know this may sound outlandish to you, but it's true. I've watched it after spending almost 40 years in the natural health field and studying regular medicine as well as natural medicine, and as well as physics and the whole scientific side, as well as the psychological side. I have a pretty good view of the whole thing, and on top of it I studied Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Tibetan medicine, and ancient Hindu yoga medicine, as well as naturopathic, homeopathic, herbal medicine, and so forth. So I've got a pretty good view of what's going on, how the body works, and what it takes to get it well. And I'm telling you that in most cases you're not going to need all these heavy medications. Recently, I just uncovered something that I had found, actually gotten a while back. What this is a reproduction by the Merck company of the Merck Manual. Now, for those that are not in medicine, that may not mean anything to you, but there is a book about this thick called the Merck Manual. It has been around for a long time. Back in 1999, they were celebrating 100 years from 1899 to 1999, and so they reprinted the Materia Medica treatment book called the Merck Manual from 1899. When you look in this, it says that this book contains all of the drugs. The physician will find a complete ready reference book covering the entire eligible materia medica. That means every drug that was out there in 1899 is in this little book. Now, it actually comprises about 72 pages of the various chemicals, herbs, and minerals and so forth that were used for treatment in 1899. Then a portion of the book actually is on, it's like an index of different problems and what different medications or drugs or chemicals were used for those at the time. Interestingly, this was pretty much the level of medications clear into the 1900s, early 1900s. Now, there's an author who is a medical doctor by the name of Lewis Thomas. Thomas Lewis. Anyhow, yeah, it's Thomas Lewis. Anyhow, he wrote some books about the Medusa and the snail and some other things, notes from the youngest science, reflections at night when listening to Mahler's Ninth and so forth. But they're interesting books because his first big book, I guess, was called The Lives of the Cells. And he was saying that in his early days of medicine, which was in this century, their whole treatment was in a little book that would fit in their hip pocket. And he said that the greatest feat that a physician could do was to diagnose and prognosticate. In other words, this is what you have and here's what you can expect. The treatment side of it was very minimal, and he said it was in a small manual that would fit in his hip pocket, which is about like this little Merck manual of 1899. It carried through into the 1900s. There weren't many things out there, and most of them were either out-and-out chemicals, mineral compounds, or herbal, most often single herbs or sometimes herb complexes. That was the treatment for years until down the road. It was discovered by chemistry that they could synthesize or make synthetic molecules, and that changed the whole industry. It changed and made them able to patent drugs and therefore to make big money, and it changed the whole face of the chemical industry, which a part of it became the pharmaceutical industry. I'm hoping, people get born into this world, and their knowledge of the world is what they experience as they're growing up. So they have, in most cases, no knowledge of what's happened that brought you up to this point. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do, is to give you this bigger perspective, and I hope I'm doing more than trying. I hope I'm getting it to you, to just understand what's going on. So there now, I counted up, on the average, there's probably 600 to 700 of substances on about 73 pages in this book. The rest of the book, as I say, it's a list of indications of, for different problems, what ones of these things could be used. So we're talking about circulating between 600 and 700 substances that were used medicinally, that were approved at that point. Now, on the average today, there's about 15,000 prescription drugs at any given time on the market. Now, several years ago, I decided to subscribe to a loose leaf drug manual that every month was updated, meaning you pulled some out that they've pulled from the market and you put the new ones in. Well, it ended up that every month there was a couple of hundred pages that had to be put in and taken out. It got to be such a problem that when my subscription ran out, I never renewed, because it took a long time every month just to put in the ones being introduced and to pull out the ones that they were pulling, either because they were dangerous, ineffective, or had so many problems that they decided to pull them out. So that we're talking any given month, 15,000 drugs in circulation. So that is a lot of a lot of drugs out there. Now, guess what? All of those companies that make those drugs want their share of the market for those. So guess what? You have to market. And how do you market? That's something that we're going to start talking about. But let's talk about, just for a moment, that the average drug. Now, this isn't coming from me. Sometime within the last year or two, a representative, actually a high-level executive of one of the major pharmaceuticals, was being interviewed. And he said in this interview that for when you release a drug on the market for a particular problem or symptom, to manage that, he said that the average effectiveness, okay, now effectiveness means, does this drug produce the effect you're trying to produce in the body? The average effectiveness is about 40%. That means that when 10 people buy that drug and pay a lot of money for it, only about 4 of 10 even get the effect that they're paying for. Now, I think about that in light of something else called the placebo effect. I'm pretty sure everybody by now knows what the placebo effect is. Well, the placebo effect means that you get what you expect to get when you take something, bottom line. You expect it to help you, and when you take it, it helps you. Well, you know what the placebo effect on the average tends to run is about 38 to 42% effective. Now, if that's the case, then you're paying a lot of money that, in fact, if you do get effect from it, how much of it is actually placebo? Now, you think that's hypothetical. There's a new book that has come out called The Undiscovered Mind, which is going to be on the book list. How the Human Brain Defies Replication, Medication, and Explanation. This guy does a really good job of looking at this idea of placebo and how many of the drugs. Now, I read a study on one of the big drugs on the market that came out called Effexor, which is one of those ones for depression and so forth. And when I read the study, it said that the final human trials before it came on the market were that the effectiveness was 38%. I also read that the placebo was about 42%. Now, which should they have put on the market? The Effexor or the placebo? Well, first of all, the placebo had no adverse effects. But they put the Effexor out, and it does have adverse effects. I think I told you before, maybe I haven't, but it's worth repeating. A friend of mine, or kind of a friend acquaintance, who was one of the originators of neurolinguistic program. His name was Richard Bandler. He wrote several books. He and Grinder wrote some books together. The first two were called The Structure of Magic, Volume 1 and 2, when they introduced something called neurolinguistic programming to the public, which has to do with the effect of linguistics on neurology. In other words, how do words affect how your brain functions, bottom line. So, he decided one day, after having looked into placebos and all that a lot, he put a product on the market called Placebo. And on the package he said, title placebo, indications none, active ingredients none, put it on the market, and in no time he was getting calls from all these people how powerful it had worked to make them feel better. And so he's kind of amazed, because I think it was kind of half a joke. So he thinks, well, maybe some people want something more powerful, so he puts out another product called Placebo Extra Strength. Same thing, it says it's placebo, but he calls it Placebo Extra Strength. On the label it says active ingredients none, indications none. And guess what? People say, wow, this new one really works well. And I'm saying all that to say that this guy starts talking about not only psychoactive drugs, but medication studies in general. And I think you'll find it an interesting read, even though it may unsettle you, because when you're talking about billions and billions of dollars for a drug bill that is being expended, how much of it is really doing anything for you, number one, and what it is doing is what you expected it might do, and number three, to worry that if you don't take it, you're going to die. I think it needs to raise some questions. At least it does to me. And to show you how powerful, I'll throw in real fast, I think I may have mentioned before, but many of you probably didn't see it before, about the creobizin, which was a product many years ago that was researched for cancer. Some people said that preliminary studies showed that it looked very promising, as usual. And so this doctor had a patient in the hospital whose body was full of tumors, and he was considered to be terminal. And so it finally got to the point that he figured the guy only had just a few weeks at the most, or maybe less. And so somehow the patient heard about the study on this substance and said, doctor, could I get some of that? And he said, well, I'll see. It's really in experimental stage right now, but I'll see if it's possible. Well, the bottom line is he was able to get it. He gave the guy an injection, and within a day, the tumor started shrinking. The guy who had been bedridden was up out of bed and moving around, and within a few days, he was released to go home because his tumors were shrinking tremendously. The guy had been home a week or two doing extremely well, and he heard on the news that there were some questions about the effectiveness of that cretobizin. Within a day, his tumor started to grow like crazy. He was back in the hospital and very distressed, and the doctor came in to see him, and he said, well, it's not working anymore, and I heard that they didn't think it was that good, and the doctor said, oh, don't worry about it. Actually, the stuff, some of it was aged. It wasn't as powerful as it should have been. I'm going to get you an injection of a brand new batch, just manufactured. He came in, gave him an injection, and within a day, the tumor started shrinking again. The guy gets better. He's sent home and is feeling great. He's out doing things. His tumors are almost totally gone. And then they make an announcement on the news that they've discontinued the study of cretobizin because they found it to be useless. Within a day, his tumors are growing faster than ever. He's back in the hospital, and within a week, he's dead. Now, when we talk placebo, that's placebo. But what did the placebo do? It was getting the person well. So what is it? You get what you expect. That's what placebo is. You get what you expect. So how much of them? When you read this Dr. John Horgan, you're going to find out that he raises some serious questions about the whole thing with drugs. He also wrote a book called The End of Science some time back, but it's very good material. Okay, so I think we're getting down on time. We're at the end already, so I'm just trying to decide. What we're going to do is, we're going to extend it just a minute. So I've given you enough to think about to start with, and then we're going to get heavy into the mind programming stuff. Since we come to the end of our spot of time for today, I'm just going to mention that we're going to get in more to the whole disease idea, the whole thing of the mind-body, what we can do, because all of this that I'm leading to is, it's costing us $1 trillion to be sick. And are we actually getting people well, or are we complicating the problem and making it worse? We'll be talking about this gentleman who wrote a book. His name is Blair Justice, PhD, Who Gets Sick, How Beliefs, Moods, and Thoughts Alter Your Health or Affect Your Health. We're going to be talking about quite a few things. Okay, so how can we solve the problem? That's what we're going to be talking about. It's costing us $1 trillion to be sick, but are we getting well from the treatment that we're paying the $1 trillion for? And the answer, of course, is obviously no. There's more illness than ever, more chronic disease than ever. So we're going to be talking about the mechanism, what goes on in the body, and what are some of the things that are running up the bill that are in our hands, that we can make change about. And so do we have to have this sick bill? No, we don't have to, and we're going to talk about the reasons why. So don't forget to go to our website, mindyourhealthcast.com. That's kind of our hub from which everything else springs. From that springs our broadcast, which is from freedohealthcast.com/mindyourhealthcast to get onto our video, and to our website, which is Alternative Health and Prevention. You can click directly from mindyourhealthcast.com. From our forum, where you can go to and say what you would like to say, request what you'd like to hear or covered, or to contradict what I say. Whatever you want to say, it's open. It's a forum. Or you can go to our shopping cart and avail yourself of some of the products, which you'll pay no more through our website. We will make a very small percentage, and I laugh because it is very small, to help offset the cost of the broadcast, which we're presenting to you free. And don't forget the DVDs if you missed the programs, or if you wanted to look at it in more detail. Again, that they're available to purchase, and we have several people now have started actually wanting to have a copy of every one we do. So far we've been doing one every week, and we probably will continue to do so. We may be doing some actually internet radio too. Some other things are in consideration. But we are going to be talking about the programming of your mind and mind viruses and some of that, and how all this leads to the problem with our health, and how big a participant we are in it. And the other big one we really want to talk about is media itself. We're going to talk about some of these commercials and how they suck you in and sell you on a subconscious level, and you don't even realize that it's happening to you. And we're going to talk about that. And in the meantime, you might want to get the book Mind Programming by Eldon Taylor and maybe start getting some insight into the whole thing, because he tells you how they use this in advertising tremendously. In fact, there's special training programs to train advertising people how to influence people on an unconscious level to go out and buy products. That's why I said the pharmaceuticals can buy the best of those companies and produce the best ads. And I want to talk about a couple of them, how interestingly they've done it, and how they apply these principles to imprint it in your mind and cause you to go buy something or go to your doctor and get a drug because you think you might have a problem because of the way they presented it. So it was nice to be with you again. I guess we're ready to close and fold it up for today. So I hope your next week is healthier than this week, and that your outlook is brighter than ever, and that everything's going well with you. Until the next time.